And welcome to the Barry Foster Show from the beautiful Ridge Floor Studios in the City of Charm, downtown Avon Park. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions, please list them in the comments below. We're always interested in some of the guests you'd like us to talk to, some of the subjects you'd like us to broach. So please don't be shy. Put them in there, and always like and subscribe. We have Patrick Colbeck on the phone, the Chief Operating Officer of Lindell Management, which gives assistance to the Lindell Offense Fund. I don't know, like we do, you must get a lot of information from Mike Lindell and the work that he's had trying to overcome and restore election integrity. Patrick, good to have you with us, my friend.
Great to be with you, Barry.
I know that you have a lot of experience in election integrity. You were a Michigan State Senator for a while, weren't you?
Yep. Not the fun part of my career path, but yeah, I spent 2 terms in the Michigan Senate before I was term limited in 2018, and actually ran for governor after that.
In Wayne County, you were, I think, was Ann Arbor and Detroit both in your district?
No, Ann Arbor's a next door neighbor to mine. I'm actually halfway between Ann Arbor and Detroit. Wayne County is a county in which I reside, but because it's a high population area, there's multiple Senate districts within Wayne County. So mine was pretty much, it shifted after my first term from pretty much the western and southern border of Wayne County, and then shifted into pretty much just the northwest corner of Wayne County for my second term.
It's not the reddest area of the country, and as a Republican, how did you manage to get elected?
Hard work and the grace of God. We kind of, when my wife and I felt called to run for office, we prayed about it, and I gave God a deadline of February 21st, and this is back in the 2010 time frame, I believe. And on that morning, my devotion read from 1 Corinthians 9:24, which said, "For many run in the race, but only one gets the prize. Run in such ways to get the prize." So we took that as a calling to go off and do it, even though I'd never served in any political capacity prior to that, unless you count church council.
Well, congratulations. I know you were the vice chair of the Senate Elections and Government Reform Committee. Uh, as a Republican, did you have much support? Were you able to get anything accomplished in that role?
Well, it's a good question. At the time, the legislature and the executive branches were controlled by Republicans when I was in there for my whole time period from 2011 to 2018. And we had a supermajority in the Michigan Senate, and which meant we had 27 out of the 38 seats under Republican control. And you would think that you'd be able to tackle the topic of election fraud with that sort of majority, but it was actually the Senate Majority Leader that blocked any discussion of election integrity in the Elections Committee, because the chairperson was beholden to the Senate Majority Leader, and was advised that he didn't want to have any discussions on election integrity. I had Catherine Engelbrecht go with True the Vote ready to come on in, talk about issues with our current election system, and due to political considerations, probably because I was running for governor at the time and they didn't want to have any media attention to that would be brought by the committee hearing, give me a boost or anything. That was probably the reason for it. But we had dead to rights back in 2016 with some funky business in the city of Detroit that need to be investigated. And I called for investigation with our attorney general, and nothing ever came out of it, despite them identifying 31 counts of voter fraud via the Secretary of State. So this is not an R versus B issue, clearly. This is a case of power brokers wanting to control who the people are in those seats. And ultimately, the reason why elections are so important is because our elections represent the voice of the people. And if you silence the voice of the people by stealing elections, we cease to be a constitutional republic. So this is a big deal, and I'm really appreciative of Mike's work on getting the word out. on why election integrity is so important. And Mike is, this wasn't ever on his radar either to get into election integrity. But once he found out what he found out regarding our elections and the electronic voting systems and their vulnerabilities and how they're used to manipulate elections, he couldn't stay quiet about it. And he was penalized quite a bit as a result.
and still is being penalized for that matter.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah. Big
I,
victory recently, though. So I like to focus in on the good stuff. So he just recently got exonerated for somebody who tried to change the terms of the competition for the cyber symposium. That Mike was on the hook previously for $5 million, and after going to an appeals process, he got exonerated and said, "Nope, you can't change the rules of the game after it's already done."
I know that you work with Microsoft as a business expert. So did that help you into unpacking what may or may have been not been happening with these electronic voting machines?
Well, it definitely helped when I was, um, serving as a poll challenger out at the TCF Center during the 2020 election in Detroit, where I saw all the electronic voting systems, which were all Dominion in Detroit in my county of Wayne. They're all Dominion voting systems, and they had one of the senior vice presidents of Dominion in Detroit managing the election, which is kind of odd in and of itself. Why would you have Nick Economakis, a senior executive with your company, sitting in Detroit managing the election returns? That didn't make sense. But having said that, I was there and I verified and I testified in many court cases that these machines were indeed connected to the internet during tabulation, um, and it was very frustrating for me to be told no, 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 they weren't, and people try to dismiss it as hearsay. And I have pretty clear evidence. I know what I'm looking for when I'm as a certified Microsoft small business specialist. I know when the machines are connected to the internet. So we knew they were aligned from day one on this, and it's frankly taken about 5 years since then to pull together all the evidence because they are very good at lying and hiding and obfuscating. And but I think what we're seeing now up in the public square is that they're finally getting held accountable for their malfeasance. So Tulsi Gabbard's announcements are just the tip of the iceberg.
I've heard a supervisor of elections say that their local reporting is connected to the internet only just very briefly while these results are, and then it's shut off again. I mean, if how long in the world of these machines do you have to be connected for something to happen?
You can't be connected anytime between the certification of the machines and the certification of the election. So, and frankly, you don't need an internet connection to modify election results using these electronic voting systems. But internet connections makes them able to manipulate it on the fly should the election uh, proceed in a way that they didn't predict. So it allows you to do kind of a closed loop control system, if you will, where you can um, adjust your control effort or the manipulation of the election results on the basis of what's actually happened, like voter turnout might be a variable that you need to control to. By the way, in case you're wondering, I'm also an engineer, so I'm an aerospace engineer's background. I used to work on space station and the environmental control system. So I've got a bit of a technology background, plus serving in the Senate. I understand the policies. Matter of fact, one of the first things that I did when I started service in the Michigan Senate was I diagrammed out in process flow diagrams all the election processes. So I'm probably the worst nightmare for those who are trying to steal our elections because I got a pretty good handle not only on the technology side but also on the legal side and the process side. So it was pretty clear from the get-go that these guys were trying to pull the wool over our eyes. And thankfully, a lot of meddling kids out there, of which Mike is like the grand poobah of meddling kids. We exposed what was happening, and I'm seeing evidence through recent actions by the Department of Justice that we're finally going to start seeing some accountability.
We're talking with Patrick Colbeck, who's the COO with Lindell Management. Mike Lindell has been at the sword point, the tip of the spear, trying to restore election integrity. Uh, Patrick, I know that you wrote a book, the 2020 coup, which outlines what happened and what we can do about election integrity. Putting that book together, did you find things that you did not know, or did things occur to you that once you try to put it in a book format, you found stuff that you were unaware of, or it all began to make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, when I was serving as a poll challenger at the TCF Center, obviously you're working in a bubble. You can only see what's in front of you. I was there when they had the 3:30 a.m. drop of ballots at the back of the TCF Center without any chain of custody. I was there when they put up the pizza boxes up on the windows to prevent anybody from overseeing what they were doing in the election. And obviously, I told you about the fact that I was there to monitor the fact that these guys had internet connections during the tabulation of the results. So I had but even that was a limited window into the full scope of what was going on. So after I got out of my 24-hour plus shift at the TCF Center, I started poking around and started talking about what I saw. And as I started talking about what I saw, as a former senator and as a former uh, gubernatorial candidate, I started getting a pretty good reach, and people started reaching out to me with their stories, and they effectively flooded the zone with information that, frankly, was very difficult to triage. I had to separate out what was fact from fiction, what was solid, what was not solid. So one of the first things that I did is I started putting together what I refer to and what the military refers to as a concept of operations. So if somebody were to steal an election, what would it look like? And then I started saying, does any of the evidence that I'm receiving from people support any of these different attack vectors? And it did. And I organized all that information eventually into the book that you're referring to called the 2022. And so yeah, the tough part is, you're swimming in a sea of data. How do you make sense of it, and how do you pull it all together? And that was a big challenge, and it still is a challenge to a certain degree today, because a lot of the information you need to connect the dots is not necessarily available in as an open record or as a something that you can obtain via freedom of information. You have to do it via a court proceeding, and what's happened in a lot of these court proceedings is that they've dismissed the case before it goes to discovery, so that you can't get access to the information you need to go to the next step and prove that these guys were engaged in malfeasance. So it's been very difficult, but thankfully, there's a lot of information that's come out since then through folks like Patrick Byrne, through Mike Lindell, attorney Stephanie Lambert, my good friend Sheriff Darleaf up in Barry County, where we now have access to internal emails from Dominion based on court cases where we did get discovery, and that information just blows, highlights the fact that we've been lied to since day one.
Well, we know now that President Trump has called for a special prosecutor to examine these 2020 elections. Are you now able to get with other people who have come up with similar or even different kinds of information to begin to put this all together into a larger scope?
Well, just to be clear, we've been working together pretty much since day one, as far as what I call this group of meddling kids from all over the country. As a matter of fact, I was called out to testify in Arizona to what I found at the end of November in 2020 by Representative Mark Fincham. So we've been collaborating on all this for a while, and everybody's been in the same situation where we've been swimming in data, and everybody has different focus areas that they've zeroed in on. Mark would focus in on the ballots and the inventory control around the ballots, for example. Other people would focus in on the technology and the PCAPs. That's where Mike was zeroed in on, why the machines are so bad. I'm a systems engineer at heart. I'm trying to see how all the pieces fit together. So I would maybe be more at the 30,000 foot level and trying to connect all the folks who are doing detailed analysis down at the 10-foot level, folks like Jeff O'Donnell, for example, and then we'd get the data coming in from things like the Arizona audit and highlighting that we're seeing similar data from there. We're also got data from Tina Peters, who's now serving that 9-year prison sentence for doing her job as a Mesa County, Colorado clerk to preserve election records. And we found out from her that they were keeping 2 sets of books on these servers, and that these machines were indeed connected to the internet and a whole bunch of other data in her Mesa County report. So it took a while to pull all this information together, but guess what now? All the folks in DOJ right now have that information. I can tell you personally that I have provided a 2 terabyte drive compiled with evidence from all 50 states, or as many states as I had evidence in at the time, talking about specific cases and incidents of malfeasance. So it's good that we finally have folks that are serious about it. And frankly, if you want to know how serious the folks up in DC are about getting to the bottom of this election fraud, you have to look no further than the outside of President Trump's Oval Office. He's got his mugshot sitting out there. So he hasn't forgotten what these guys tried to do to him and his family and to his supporters. And I think you're going to start seeing things heat up quite a bit now that we've started to clean out the Department of Justice and FBI.
It's more friendly now, but have you at any time felt like some people might have made some suggestions that bad things can happen if you keep going down the road you're on?
Well, I personally have been visited by special agents from Michigan's Attorney General, Dana Nessel, who's a Democrat, and they're trying to intimidate me to shut me up when I attempted to go and monitor what was going on in the Wayne County vote tally in the 2022 election. I had no less than 5 law enforcement officers assigned to make sure that I didn't get anywhere near the county server that was supposedly tallying the votes from everything. And so, no, they're using intimidation tactics, and that's just mild compared to what they've done to Tina Peters. And also in Michigan, we had an alternate slate of electors, 16 electors that were put forward, and they are charging them criminally with a bunch of bogus charges. We have attorneys that have been sanctioned and prohibited from engage in their livelihood, like Rudy Giuliani's, my good friend Sidney Powell, and others. We've got an attorney, Stephanie Lambert, here in Michigan, who's being attacked. We've got good clerks, the ones that stand up and question what's going on with the election results, like Tina. But there's also folks in Michigan, like Stephanie Scott, that have been doing it. All these folks have been intimidated and told to sit down and shut up. And if not, we're going to come at you criminally and prosecute you. And that's what they've done. And I've received multiple love letters from Dominion saying shut up, and I'm not shutting up because the truth is on our side.
Well, with the rulings in the Dominion case, you feel like we've kind of turned the corner. I mean, on the federal level, maybe not on your particular state level.
Yeah, I think we have. I mean, when you have the director of national intelligence talk about these electronic voting system vulnerabilities, that's kind of a big deal. It's something that John Ratcliffe hinted at right before he left office as the director of national intelligence in Trump's first term. But now it's getting some traction. And there's an old term in politics called the Overton window. I don't know if you've ever heard of that before, if your listeners have heard about it before. But sometimes people aren't just ready to hear the truth. They have to wait until there's a window of opportunity that allows people to discuss that particular topic, and before you can get people to actually believe in that proposition or that topic, like election fraud. And just to give you a quick overview of what Overton window is that it's Michael Overton was a founder of an organization called the Mackinac Center out here in Michigan, and it's kind of a marketing term. And bottom line is, people won't believe anything you have to say unless it fits within that window. And as policy representatives, like I was in the Michigan Senate, if I want to go off and push a policy that may not be popular right now in my district or across the state, you have to communicate why it's important and give everybody the evidence, share information until all of a sudden they start understanding, oh, this isn't just a pipe dream. This is something that's possible, and we can go off and do it. Kind of like the Detroit Lions winning the Super Bowl. And so when you finally have a good season, people start believing that, oh yeah, you could actually go off and do it. Now the Overton window's open where people are saying, hey, there is something wrong with these electronic voting systems. There is something wrong with these voter rolls. There is something wrong with this abuse of power that's been happening. There's something wrong with all the money laundering that's going on through government organizations like USAID. And we've gotten to the bottom of it, and it all fits together to paint a picture in that window now that says there are actual people that are not looking out for the best interests of American citizens, and they need to be held accountable now.
Well, there's some mileposts coming up. I know that is it September 21st, the deadline for the Trump executive order that the states have to comply. That should be getting some play in the media here in the next month or so. Does that kind of open the window a little bit for you to kind of get your fingers through?
Yeah, I think September and October are going to be some very interesting months because not only does that take effect, but also, we've got RFK Jr. is going to be coming out with his audit report that's going to get at the heart of what's going on with vaccines and what's causing autism in society. And when you find out that there's actively members of our own government and the pharmaceutical industry working in collusion to not in the best interest of the health of Americans or people all across the world, but actually just focusing on the almighty dollar at their expense, there's going to be some people in uproar. And when you dig into it even further, the fact that the COVID bone's connected to the election fraud bone in 2020, it starts opening up a much broader discussion that we haven't, frankly, been allowed to have under this massive Ministry of Truth-like censorship apparatus that we've had under the Biden administration, and so now we're finally getting a chance to talk again.
And with the midterms coming up, we've already been warned that uh, the electors, the Congress people, the senators who are up for election are going to be focusing back in on their reelection, and people are going to be looking to unseat them. The whole idea of the election themselves is going to come up. That's another kind of bump for you to get the window open to talk about not only the midterms but the midterm process, is it not?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, in the wake of the 2020 election, we were calling for accountability, investigations, and audits, and said if we don't do that, the 2022 election is going to go very poorly. And in Michigan, states like Michigan, it went very poorly. We went from Republican control of the legislature to complete Democrat control of the legislature because they refused to look in on this election fraud. And so I'm hoping that they take a cue from that and other circumstances all across the country. It doesn't matter if you're a red state, purple state, blue state, whatever. There's fraud in every single state we've looked into right now. And so what we got to have, and there's a one-word solution to all the concerns people have around the integrity of our elections, and that's transparency. And we're getting more and more transparency under the Trump administration, more and more transparency with the ability to actually start talking about this without having to use code words on podcasts like yours. I still remember in the wake of the 2020 election, I couldn't talk about Dominion. I had to say Domino's. I couldn't talk about ballots. I had to say pizza, because otherwise it would get banned on platforms like YouTube.
Hmm.
So and I don't know if you recall, but Congress actually put out a report on an organization called the Election Integrity Partnership that was actively colluding with the federal government to censor Americans and topics around election integrity. So I think the fact that we're going into this upcoming election without that Ministry of Truth hanging over us to the extent that it had been before, that alone bodes well because now we can talk about it. We can put our information out there, our evidence out there for the public to discern whether or not it's they believe it or not. And instead of having it get shut down by some fake fact checker sitting in his mom and dad's basement somewhere. So that alone gives me hope, but there's a lot of other things happening. And if the stuff that I believe is going to be revealed in the next few months gets out into the open, it's going to be a slam dunk for the 2026 election to get the Patriots back in control of our government.
Yeah, with the information that Tulsi Gabbard has now released about the Steele dossier, things that we on our radio, I was on terrestrial radio at that time, we were talking about there, that Rush Limbaugh was talking about there, those things that we had been talking back 2016, 2017 are now being let go. Is there some kind of new revelations? Are you kind of going back to square one, getting your talking points and your information, or saying, yeah, here's the new revelations that we were talking about back in 2018 and 2019?
Well, you notice that Trump was very good in his first campaign back in 2016 of just repeating the same basic theme until it registered on people why it's so important. I think people get why build the wall was so important in the wake of the Biden administration, which their theme was destroy the wall, right? So everybody now understands why that's so important. And yes, I think even Democrats prior to the 2020 election were singing some of the same tunes that we are around the vulnerabilities on these machines. But post 2020, they weren't allowed to. We're not allowed to talk about any of the same thing. Well, now we're talking about it again, and everybody can talk about the vulnerabilities in these electronic voting systems. And you're right, it's time to pull out all the information we had out at the beginning. I think my book, frankly, has stood the test of time in regards to all the evidence that was put in there. It's become even more compelling with age, which is always good for a book on telling everybody how something was done. And so I hope everybody gets a chance to read it. It's up at if you want to buy your own copy, you can go to mystore.com and type in the promo code meddling kids and you'll get a discount on it. But it's a good primer on what is actually happening, because we need to put together a big framework for how all this stuff ties together. And that's what I sought to do with the book. But also, that's what we need to continue to do as we find more and more information out there, like all the financial money laundering, which is a topic I did not address in the book. I focused on technology primarily and the information war.
That is the 2020 Coup, COUP, and it's by Patrick Colbeck. That's Colbeck. And Patrick, I was going to ask you, is as now this becomes more and more prevalent in discussions, are there good places, your book being one of them, where people can kind of read up, so when they come to us and say, hey, I know, Barry, I know you're involved in politics. What about this? What about that? Is there places we can send them, like to your website, let'sfixstuff.org, to your book? Are there other places where they can find out about the Chinese components in the machines, and the false mail-in ballots by the Chinese, and those kinds of things that
Yeah.
people are just now only beginning to hear about?
Well, first of all, for the latest news, go to lindelltv.com, because they're talking about this stuff nonstop, and you'll get it from experts all across the country. So lindelltv.com is a good place to start. Also, I work with Mike quite extensively in the lead up to the most recent election, in particular on the website electioncrimebureau.com. There's a lot of information posted up there that people would find interesting. And I recommend using that as a primer to dig into. And of course, you can go to let'sfixstuff.org as well. There's information up there. You can follow me on Twitter. That's at PJ Colbeck for Patrick John, PJ Colbeck, Colbeck. And anyway, I've found that social media now is probably some of the best news sources that you can get, because platforms like X and Mike's got Vocal, you're getting unfiltered, generally unfiltered access to information that you couldn't get to before.
Yeah, speaking of filtered information, as this comes out on the mainstream media, people may or may not get the entire story. What can normal people do? What can regular folks do uh, in some small, medium, or large way to help
Yeah.
you out with this?
No, I'm glad you asked. There's a lot they can do right now, and that's one of the key questions that I get on social media. I go, okay, we know there's a problem. What can we do? What can we do? How can I help? Well, here's how you can help. Go to lindellplan.com, and up at the top, there's this call to action. And in that call to action, you can help President Trump get his executive orders enforced. And there's two key executive orders. We actually provide the templates. I developed them with some folks on our team, some templates that you can copy and use to help get the word out to the folks we're trying to contact. And the bottom line is we want to see people abide by the executive order from President Trump, and there's two of them. One is Executive Order 13873, and that was issued in his first term, and it deals specifically with enforcing existing law that prevents the import of systems that include components from our foreign adversaries like China. Guess what systems that includes? That includes voting systems. So we know for a fact that Dominion Voting Systems has at least 48% of their components sourced from a foreign adversary known as China. They never should have made it into the states to help support our elections, yet here we are using them, just like the Department of Defense recently was discovered to have been using China to manage the information flow for our Microsoft Office, which is nuts. And kudos to Pete Hegseth for putting a kibosh on that. But that is a really important executive order, and if we actually do enforce existing law, we should have no more electronic voting systems in the country. Second of all, President Trump in his second term issued Executive Order 14248, and while 13873 focuses on the machines and the infrastructure, 14248 is much more broad. It does have some elements around the electronic voting system, but it also zeroes in on something very important, which is cleaning up our voter rolls and holding people accountable for making sure that only qualified or eligible voters, i.e. no illegal aliens, get a chance to vote in our elections. And so we've got some letters set up so that people can send them to the Election Assistance Commission and the National Association of Secretaries of State and Dominion Voting Systems, ES&S, and Hard InterCivic, and ask them what they are doing to help comply with President Trump's executive orders. And then we can share that information. Once you share them back with us, share that info back with us, we can share that information back with the Department of Justice and make sure that all those parties are being held accountable, because if they are not complying with that executive order, number one, they move to the top of the investigative priority list inside the Department of Justice. And number two, the federal government can start clawing back and cutting off funding through HAVA grants and to those states. And as a former state legislator, there's nothing that gets a state's attention more than cutting off their federal funding stream. So this is a big deal, and everybody that's listening to this podcast can help us in that pursuit. And I just encourage everybody also to share that link, that call to action at lindellplan.com to all their friends and family, so that we can actually help President Trump while all the folks in the Senate under Senate Majority Leader John Thune are on vacation right now instead of affirming his nominations and confirming his nominations. While they're on vacation, we got some work to do to help President Trump get these executive orders enforced.
Pat, do you think that the timeline is lining up pretty well right now from September 21st through the midterms for this all to come to fruition?
Yeah, I'm hoping to see no more machines by the end of this year.
That would be just incredible. And if you want to get informed, it is really easy to do. You can go to lindelltv.com. You can go to electioncrimebureau.com, letsfixstuff.org. And of course, purchase a copy of Patrick's book, Patrick Colbeck, The 2020 Coup, and that'll help you. But the most important thing, and I think it'll all kind of lead back to the beginning, is this new lindellplan.com, which has a call to action and also has links to all the things. If you want to become informed, you can become informed there.
Yep, that's a perfect summary.
Hey, Patrick, I really appreciate your time. We really appreciate what you're doing. And as we go along, if you need to get more of the information out, you've always got a platform here.
I appreciate it, Barry. Knock 'em alive out there.
Thank you so much. Patrick Colbeck, COO of Lindell Management, working with the Lindell Offense Fund. Please go to these websites, lindelltv.com, electioncrimebureau.com, letsfixstuff.org, but the most important is lindellplan.com. You've been listening to the Barry Foster Show, coming to you from the Ridge Florida Studios in the city of Charm, beautiful Avon Park. If you have any thoughts, ideas, or suggestions, put them in the comments below. always glad to hear from you. As we continue to search for truth, justice, in the American way, this is Barry Foster, and we'll see you next time.